Well, today we're going to talk a little bit about some of the new AccuForce analysis features and clipping. And so before we get any further, I'll try to define clipping. For the purpose of this tutorial, I would define it as a situation where the game settings for your wheel are incorrectly set to the point that the game is requesting 100% torque from the wheel for extended periods of time, which would result in a loss of detail. So if the game is requesting 100% torque, the wheel's giving 100% torque for an extended period of time, you may then lose the ability to initially feel an understeer or oversteer situation. And that's really what we want to avoid. There's nothing wrong with the game asking for 100% torque, and that's quite normal. But what we want to watch out for are extended instances of this. So I'm going to go ahead and hop into the control center. We can the visual lap analyzer and load up a lap and take a look at some data here. And so I ran 4 laps here earlier this evening, and the first 2 laps are ran with just the default settings. The third lap is ran after having auto-tuned, and the fourth lap is ran with the Simxperience force feedback. That is not really necessary for us to dig into that to understand clipping at this point. So I'm going to go ahead and load up the first lap. Just double click on it here. And I'm going to change my mode to force feedback clipping mode. And so it may be a little difficult to see. I'll go ahead and zoom in. There are red areas where we've got blocks of clipping. And so each one of these blocks represents a 16 millisecond sample period. And this is undesirable. We wouldn't want to see 100% torque called on for that period of time. If we look around the rest of the lap, it's really consistent that way. Not really what we want to see. So what I'm going to do is go ahead and load up the lap. Where we use the auto tuning here. And again, I'm going to switch my mode to force feedback clipping, and we're going to see that there are far fewer red instances where 100% torque is asked for, and they're not in lengthy blocks of time. These are just quick blips, and that is perfectly fine and actually ideal. So go ahead and just reset back to the default view there. Another interesting thing to understand is that the game's belief about what clipping is and the reality of what clipping is are 2 entirely different things. So we're looking here now at what the game believes, what the game's force feedback believes is clipping when we look here. But if we look at the AccuForce clipping, we're going to get the actual truth, and it's far less clipping. And what I'm going to try to do here is explain why using some of the new analysis features that we just built into the SimCommander beta for the AccuForce. So I'll switch back to the force feedback clipping view, and I'm just going to zoom in on this section of the track. Use the slider bar here to move us into the sample. We can use our arrows, our mouse arrow here, to click on the left and right side of the slider and move through samples one at a time. And so I'm just going to move through here and find a good example. And here's a great example. So we're now on a sample that the game believes is clipping. It believes it's using negative 100% torque, so full torque in one direction. But in fact, we're really only using 92% torque, and we can see that the commander is requesting 8% torque. And if we go figure out why, we go down to the commander section, we can see the damper is using 100%. The friction is using 2%, the inertia is using 4%, and the oscillation control is using 1%. And so, this total of 8% commander torque offsets the negative 100% game requested torque, and we don't wind up clipping. It's interesting that to note that wheels that don't have the ability for you to custom set the resistance, in terms of the friction and dampener and inertia, because they just have those built in through their drivetrain or belt, don't wind up with this, in this example, an 8% advantage. So we're able to make a bit more out of the torque available with this method. So I'm not going to get into significant detail here. I'll leave that for some future tutorials, but there are a lot of really cool things that you can do. You can go create some custom track map views where you can show your wheel speeds. You can show your wheel accelerations and RPMs a second squared, and that's a really interesting one because you can find spots on the track where you're moving the wheel pretty erratically. These are definitely points of interest. Most likely either cases where you're losing control, about to lose control, or maybe hit a really serious bump that you might want to try to avoid, find a better line if possible. So just a lot of cool things we can get into in future tutorials that will help you better understand your wheel, how to configure it, and perhaps even some useful driving information.